Hey everyone, it's Monday, and you know what that means. We start off our expert series of the week with Greg Dickerson. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, folks, if you like this discussion, you like what Greg and I are discussing here, please know that he has his own playlist on this channel, one rental at a time. Check it out. There must be 20 hours of us discussing various topics over the last year or so. So, if you like these, which you will, do yourself a favor, subscribe to the channel, and please check out Greg's playlist. It is full of just tremendous value. I appreciate you, man. Thank you for giving me this time every week.
Yeah, absolutely. Mondays with Michael. I look forward to it.
I love that Mondays with Michael. I think I got to get you a shirt that says that. But you
I
know
might
what?
need a hat.
Yeah, I might need a hat. There you go. What I want to do today is we are about 2 weeks away from an important election, and we have two candidates. One of them is going to win. And what I thought we would do is we would take a what if case scenario. What if Trump wins? And we have to make some assumptions here. And most of that is about Congress's makeup. So in our first discussion, it will be Trump wins, Congress stays the same, right? Mitch has the Senate, Nancy has the House. And then we're going to talk about stimulus and taxes and infrastructure, healthcare, manufacturing, inflation, and housing. And then what we're going to say is after that's done, that'll probably be 20 minutes or so. We'll go in and do the same thing for Biden, except with a Biden win, we're going to assume a blue wave. Basically, the presidency is flipped and if some seats in the Senate flip, Minch is out, whoever takes over for the Democrats. Does that sound like an interesting exercise?
We are going to talk politics. And, somebody once told me, you can't talk politics, money, or religion. I'm like, well, what else is there to talk about?
Yeah.
So, just for people watching, this isn't, a view of what's better, what's not better, what's right, what's not right. It is hypothetical. What happens if Trump stays in? Congress looks the same. What happens if Biden wins? You get a blue wave. I'm not sure there will be a blue wave if Biden wins, but let's just
Yeah.
assume there is,
We
and
have
we
to
can talk
assume
about
something.
that.
Yeah. And again,
Yeah.
you and I will do everything we can to stay political. We won't bring our biases in there. But you and I are business owners. You and I are, we're risking millions of dollars. So I think it's a fair assumption to say, what happens if this? What happens if that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. So we're going to start with a Trump win. And again, the Senate stays the same. So first thing we need to talk about is, okay, November 4th or 5th, whatever it is, Trump is the winner. The first thing we're going to talk about is stimulus, because I don't see any stimulus of any size getting done before the election. But post November 3rd, assuming a Trump win, what are your thoughts on the next significant
Yeah.
stimulus deal?
And I made a video about that the other day. And, we need stimulus now. I mean, people need money, and there's things that they can do without doing the big thing that they're all fighting over how much state gets what, this, that, and the other. They can send money to people that need money. They can send money to small business that needs money. They can, rescue people that are in distress with mortgage. They can help out other people other than just Wall Street, so the excuses they're making on all this, they can cut little sections out. And I'm talking about Congress. This isn't in the hands of the president.
Mm-mm.
It's not in the hands of any one individual. It's Congress.
Yes.
Republicans and Democrats, getting together and working together like we all do every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that is something that is needed and that they need to get off. Get off the horse and start doing. The question is, are they really going to be able to do something before the election? Right now, it doesn't look like it, other than maybe some stimulus checks going out potentially.
Yeah, I think the only thing that has a chance is not even stimulus checks. The only thing that has a chance is there's like 130 million or billion left in the PPP money.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, that's going to be sent off as a standalone bill. I don't even know if that gets done. I think, frankly, nothing gets done before the election. And I guess I get it, right? You're 2 weeks out from a key election. Politics are trumping American pain, which is just so sad.
Yeah, and that's where I don't get it.
I don't get it.
Get the support, the assistance to the people that need it right now.
Mm-hmm.
This whole playing politics and all that. There is no downside to sending people money that really need the money. So I'm a conservative, but man, people need help, right?
Yeah.
We're in serious doo-doo here from an economic standpoint, and there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot at stake. And we're coming into the holidays, things like that. The good news is the election's only a few weeks away, so whoever wins, that's when the pedal hits the metal, and the floodgates will open one way or the other. So
Yeah. So let's talk stimulus. What do you think happens? It's November 4th. Trump's your president for 4 more years.
so yep. So Trump is still in office. So I think that they're still going to wrestle over the main issues of the stimulus package are all the hidden things that they're not telling everybody about in terms of, states and things like that. And there's some unintended consequences like, tax-free airline travel.
Hmm.
So they didn't think about that. Wait a minute, there's private jet cards you can buy tax-free right now. So, there's a lot of different loopholes and things that they didn't think about in these CARES Act that they passed. So I think, from the standpoint of the White House, they want to get money in the right way to the right people, versus some of the, Democrats just wanting to give everybody money in every state and just, all this crazy money. So I think there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There's still going to be a lot of infighting to get, a divided legislature to agree on something that makes sense.
Yeah,
But
well,
I think
I'll go.
if Trump wins, he's going to hold the line harder than the Democrats.
Yeah, I'll actually go this far. I believe if Trump wins November 4th, that I truly believe, and maybe it's more of a hope. I'm going to call it believe. I believe Congress gets off their ass and people have money by Christmas. That's
Yeah,
7 8 weeks.
I'm not so sure because it really is on the Democratic side where they're really holding up the ball, where
Mhm.
something could have got sent out there. And I know a lot of people may or may not agree with that, but it just is what it is.
Yep.
They're packing it in with a bunch of this fluff versus getting the money where it needs to go. So yeah, once the election's over, there's no downside at that point for Democrats to agree and play ball a little bit. And I'm not sure how the stance they're taking now is helping otherwise, because people aren't stupid. People know they're holding it up. They know that it's in their hands to pass, and that they could say, let's get money to people. So, people see right through this stuff.
Yeah, one of the biggest things that you'll see, in my opinion, is on the stimulus side. I think and we'll talk about Biden next. So hold your horses if that's where you want to go. But that will happen. I think stimulus ends up in the average American's hands faster, just because you don't have that lame duck session if Trump wins.
Yeah.
I'm going to believe that. All right. So what do you think about taxes next year? Right. There's one thing that the president, either the current president or the president-elect, would be thinking about is where the tax changes are next year. What do you see
Yeah.
there?
So if Trump is still in office, I think he's going to continue to be aggressive in terms of tax cuts to spur economic development, because we're not out of the woods yet from an economic standpoint. We are getting worse. There's serious pain in Q4. I made a video the other day about this being the most important quarter in our history of the country, potentially the history of the world. Because the United States, so many other countries, are hinging on the United States, and we have such a big impact on other countries, our economy. I think the only way to continue, I know the only way to continue to spur economic recovery and growth is you got to cut taxes. That's where jobs are created. The more punitive the tax environment, the less opportunity is created, because you're paying your money in taxes. You can't reinvest it. So that's just common economics, common sense economics. So I think Trump will get more aggressive on tax cuts to incentivize job growth, entrepreneurship, business creation.
Okay. Very cool. I would agree with that. One of the other things I'm tracking that I think of, because I think in the next 4 years, we are going to have not only stimulus that we know, the CARES Act, and get money to people, and unemployment and PPP and all of that. But what I have seen is the long talked about infrastructure stimulus, meaning bridges, highways, all of that stuff. I see a significant infrastructure bill coming regardless. But if it's a Trump White House, I see it very oriented to kind of the old world, if you will, meaning let's go redo our highways, bridges, trains, all of that stuff. Do you see an infrastructure bill coming? If so, where do you see it kind of aimed?
Yeah, I mean I think there's some proposals on the table there, and I'm going to with you. Big infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, tunnels, things like that. There's a big need for it. The issues they're going to face is environmental opposition. It's going to be a big political fight. Who gets the money? How are the contracts issued? What states get, how much? Which projects are more important? So allocation of those funds is where the fight's going to be.
Yeah.
So if you have Trump and you have, a Congress that's, balanced the way it is right now, they're all going to be fighting over who gets how much. So the question is, can they even get anything passed?
Yeah, again, I think if he's in the White House for 4 more years, his second term, he's not a politician. He's going to, push both sides to get something done. And again, I think I think the way we get out of this malaise is with an infrastructure bill, which, by the way, where I think an infrastructure bill is today is job creation. That's what it is for me. It's obviously good for the country and all of that, but for me, it's job creation, and probably significant job creation. So that's where I see infrastructure going. What about manufacturing? What do you think about, and specifically here, I'm talking about bringing manufacturing home. Do you see that being anything interesting? I've talked about a proposal that Japan's leadership did, where they actually gave tax credits to companies to bring manufacturing back to Japan. I thought that was an interesting idea we could frankly copy. It's just a bad idea, in my opinion, to have supply chains tied up in countries that frankly don't like us. So that's what I'm thinking happens is some manufacturing come home. What do you think?
Yeah, I think we need to figure out how to do that. I think the United States needs to be more self-sufficient in manufacturing. Manufacturing is becoming more technologically advanced, so it's a different manufacturing than it was, years ago. But there's still a certain number of, straight up manpower that's needed in some of these factories. The problem with dealing with that and getting anything through or growing is unions. So unions have created an unfriendly environment for manufacturing to thrive. It's just too expensive. So that's why we're offshoring. I mean, at the end of the day, that's why we're offshoring. So I think we have to figure out, how do we balance that? How do we create an environment where you can, manufacture something in this country and not get held hostage by a union, and offer, good wages? Amazon's, largely operating in this country. Walmart's operating in this country, and they're increasing their, there's a lot of people on both sides of the equation about Walmart, but there's some big American companies that are not unionized that are doing extremely well. The ones that are unionized, look at where they're at. The automotive industry, no innovation. They're the big three. We don't see electric cars like Tesla coming out of there. So there's a lot of things that just kind of holds back in terms of innovation of the manufacturing environment, and special interest promotion versus innovation, advancement, and technology, where it needs to be.
Yeah, one area that I think manufacturing comes back in a Trump administration is going to be what is all the health, the medicine, right? Drugs, and what is it called? PPP, right? Personal protection gear, or whatever that is.
I think PPE.
Yeah, PPE. Thank you. I knew there was another letter on the end of that. There's too many acronyms. But that's something that I think
they both protect employees.
Yeah, that's right. But I think one of the things coming out of this crisis, and we'll get through this eventually, is going to be that can happen again, right? Ventilators and just masks. The fact that we had to go to, foreign countries that, again, may not like us, to get masks for folks, hospitals and whatnot, is something I hope we don't tolerate again. And I hope, with beyond all hope, that is something that if Trump was in office, he goes, okay, fix that. Even if they have to subsidize, to your point, labor and cost, right? Because that, I would call that national security. That's how I would frame that. So I think there's some lessons to be learned in that, and we just can't have that happen again. That's at least my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah. We need to be more self-sufficient in the areas that it's really, really important. We need to be able to feed ourselves, power our own, economy and environment, control our own healthcare and health and safety, and not have to rely on any country, because, they're just wild cards. You just don't know what their real agenda is and what they're actually going to do when the chips start to fall. And they're going to protect themselves first, and rightfully so. And there's some huge populations out there, but the U.S., I think deglobalization is an issue that's on the table in a conversation now more so than ever. And for people that are listening, what's deglobalization? So globalization is going, taking our goods and services throughout the world and exchanging in trade, and creating a globalized economy versus a self-sufficient, national economy that's not isolated, but independent of the global environment. Right now, we're not. We do rely on a lot of our goods and services to be purchased abroad in order to keep our economy afloat. The real question is, can we survive if we just lock the door and said, we're not doing any more trade with anybody else in the world? Can we still sustain? And, that's a big economic question. And a lot of people are debating that right now.
Yeah. All right. Next one we're going to talk about is inflation. One of the things that you and I, as investors, especially in real estate, that we see both in rents and property values and all of that, is inflation. if we have big stimulus bills, if we have big infrastructure, if we have a tax changes, this economic engine of the United States could really get going. But one of the outputs often is inflation. So do you see inflation becoming a talking point, or a top of the fold problem in the next 4 years, assuming Trump is the president?
Yeah, so people are talking about it. So, can it become a problem with all the stimulus spending, QE, and all that that's happened right now? We're not seeing inflation at the retail consumer level. We're seeing it at the asset level. So it's already a problem at the asset level that at some point has to unwind. The Fed cannot
Mhm.
recap the entire market forever.
Yes,
The market cap, what's the market cap in the stock market right now? 30 trillion or something?
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't. We're at 3 trillion now in terms of a deficit. You can't recapitalize the entire stock market, so you can't recapitalize the entire credit market. That's unsustainable. And what are the real effects of that? We don't know yet. And that has to unwind at some point. So those conversations are happening. So you're talking about all right. So when you talk about stimulus, okay, or you talk about infrastructure, you're almost talking about modern monetary theory from an economic theory. That's almost modern monetary
Mhm.
theory, where you're putting money in the hands of the population.
Correct.
That's when you start to get inflation, real inflation at the consumer level, which
Mhm.
is healthy, a certain amount of it, and you kind of want to have that. But we haven't seen it since 08 and 09, because everything that's being done is not reaching the general population. And the other form of modern monetary theory that I'm talking about was the bonus unemployment that was given to people.
Yep.
You see what that does. Direct payments to individuals de-incentivizes production. So if you're de-incentivizing production through that process, then that creates deflation. So
Mm.
you still can't have inflation. So you have to have a growing economy in order for inflation to be created. And right now, we're still in a recession, headed for depression,
Mhm.
based on the resurgence of coronavirus, businesses going, closing on a daily basis, businesses contracting that were trying to open, movie theaters, the travel industry, the hospitality industry, airlines. I mean, we still have a lot of contraction. Now you see what's going on globally with the resurgence of coronavirus getting into the fall and winter. This is October 2020. Um, you, that poses a real problem in terms of how do you even create inflation?
Mhm.
And I'm not sure infrastructure spending is going to do it, because I'm not sure we even have the labor to be able to put people to work that will put money in the hands of people, which will then spur economic activity. Think of, oil boom towns. Okay.
Mhm.
That's what infrastructure spending can do to certain areas of the country, but it's only certain areas of the country. To spur inflation globally, you pretty much got to write some big checks to replace GDP that was lost through every small business in this country, every business that's closed, everybody who got laid off. You got to make them whole
Mhm.
in order to create any kind of real inflation at the consumer level. That's not going to happen under a Trump administration.
All right. So again, we'll just use 2%. That's what the Fed always talks about. So you don't see inflation being reported or otherwise at the consumer level above 2% for the next 4 years, if in a Trump
Neither
win.
does the Fed.
Yeah. No, agree. Neither does the Fed. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, for all of those same reasons. I do think a big old, because I could see 4 trillion being spent, right, both in kind of direct payments and then infrastructure combined for 4 trillion. But again, is that going to be enough to replace what is lost? Because like you, and I've said it many times, Q4 is going to be the most painful quarter of 2020. It's going to be the most painful quarter since the Great Depression. And
Here's the big differentiator. Okay.
Mhm.
The stimulus that we've done and received so far has been life support. That
Mhm.
has not been stimulus.
Mhm.
Okay. That has been life support to keep the economy from exploding and collapsing. That's all that's done. It hasn't replaced or replenished or stimulated. So you have to have real stimulation in order to generate inflation. That's what the Fed doesn't know how to do and can't do. Okay. And
Yeah.
let's put it in even easier terms to understand. If you're a local restaurant or hair salon or spa that went out of business, or a movie theater, you're a local franchisee, you have 20 movie theaters and you're bankrupt. You've been in business in your family for 100 years in movie theaters. Now
Yeah.
you're closed, you're done. That's not going to get replaced. That income, that business, that opportunity. Now you're at a point in life where you have to start over. Now what do?
Ah,
You go get a job. Most of those people are going to go get a job. So you've removed a lot of enterprise and a lot of investment from the economy that could have otherwise been made. So what the Fed hasn't figured out how to do and doesn't really understand, how do you replace that?
Mm,
That's the big problem. Stimulus to date is life support. It's not stimulus,
yeah.
and it's not going to be. You can't replace that. You can't put them back in business,
Yeah.
and you can't make a bad business good. You can only keep it going for a while. Hence
Yeah.
the zombie companies at
Zombie.
the
Yeah.
larger scale that you hear a lot of people talking about.
Very cool. So the last topic for a Trump administration, again, we were going to go through the same list for a Biden blue wave here in a minute, is housing, specifically single family homes. I think it is very clear we are seeing urban flight today. We are seeing suburbia grow, work from home, all of those things. Do you see anything slowing down in the single family market if in a Trump administration?
No, I think, the continued lower interest rate environment is what's spurring demand for housing right now. So I think that's going to be something that they'll be focused on, but you're still going to see tight lending requirements,
Oh, yeah.
so under a Trump administration, you'll see tighter lending requirements. You'll see, um, proper reserve requirements, down payments, credit scores, things like that. But you're going to see low interest rates because that does spur, economic development. It does spur home ownership. And, for a lot of people, that's a good thing. For some people, it's not so much a good thing. But yeah, I think you'll see that continue to be red hot all the way through the end of the year.
Very cool. All right. So now we're going to flip the script. We are going to have it be a Biden presidency, and we're going to give him the Senate. Again, we don't have to make judgments on the likelihood of any of that. We just have to pick something. So that's what I'm picking. So again, we start with stimulus. Biden wins November 3rd or 4th, not a contested election. He also gets the Senate. He's inaugurated, the 21st of January, I think, 20th, something like that. What do you see in a Biden administration with the full support of the Senate and the House?
Yep. So obviously, it'll be much easier to get things done from a Democratic standpoint. So stimulus, who knows what that'll look like? But whatever Nancy Pelosi is proposing and the Democrats are proposing, just look at their package and that gets passed, and then some. They'll probably increase it.
Yeah, and then some.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll see money going in a lot of different directions, which again could be good. It's putting money into the economy at the state, local level. I know there's a lot of state governments that are asking for money, to replace mismanagement
Yeah.
and, bad practice. So, states and federal governments will have a lot of money. So there'll be a lot of hiring. They'll be spending money on things. So there'll be a little bit of stimulation there. But I think you'll see a big package get passed a whole lot easier. In that you're going to have a lot of, so it's a social agenda. So you're seeing socialism come to light in the United States with a blue wave. That's where we're going to be. That will be the experiment. So you're going to see modern monetary theory. You're going to see direct payments to people. You're going to see a lot of money going out. You're going to see, in terms of a stimulus, you will see more direct payments. You will see states and those entities receiving money. You will see a lot of the causes that support Democrats being funded. A lot of the nonprofits and a lot of different community organization type things. So it'll be a really interesting experiment in socialism for the first time in this country.
Yeah, I think there's two things that happen with a Biden in a blue wave. First and foremost, the stimulus is much later than in a Trump win, in my opinion. I think, again, Trump, I think you get it by Christmas on purpose. I think everybody would want it by then. But in a Biden win, I see no progress on anything during the lame duck sessions, what it's typically called.
Yeah.
So I don't see people getting any money until best case late February, just given the calendar, and probably early March.
Everything has to flip over.
Yeah, or early March. So that's a painful 4 months. You think we're in pain right now? Oh my God. Right?
Well,
Jesus.
but it'll be hopeful for people because the people that want to see
hope doesn't pay the bills, man. Hope don't put food in the fridge.
Yeah. That's true. It's not going to put checks in the bank, and there will be big resistance, that momentum change, but at least people will know it's going to be coming. So also part of that stimulus package, again, you're going to see rent controls, you're going to see evictions on moratoriums, you're going to see more forbearance, so you're going to see a lot of those things continue. So, a blue wave can have a meaningful impact on, a lot of those things in the stimulus package. But yeah, the question is how soon can they get something through, and, what does that mean for people in the interim? And that's what I'm saying. Q4 and the first quarter of next year, it's the road we're on right now. It's going to be ugly no matter how you slice it.
I totally agree. The road we're on now is ugly regardless. But we could it'll be a double dip recession. Q4, Q1 will be shrinking quarters, so technically the definition of a recession. But the other thing I wanted to say with stimulus before we move to the next topic is not only is it later, but I will admit it will be bigger. It will be bigger in a Biden administration, and probably substantially bigger in a Biden.
Yeah, yeah, and the blue wave. So it's not just Biden, but it's if you've got a a liberal government, a Democratic led government on all sides, there is a socialist theme to that side of the government right now, that a lot of countries already have. So we just haven't had that in this country, and it's going to be an experiment in socialism. And I don't think a lot of people understand what that fully means, because you got to pay for it. So, and I'm all for some social policies to help people that can't help themselves, and to bridge the gap of income inequality that we have in this country, because that's a huge problem, between the have and the have-nots. And it's largely an educational issue, and it's largely an opportunity issue that needs to be addressed some way, somehow, because there's a lot of people that just don't have the advantages that, people like us do, right? In our own country. And that's unfortunate, and it's not right, and it needs to be addressed. And so we'll see, some movement in those areas, which is great. But unfortunately, even in a blue wave, there's going to be a lot of infighting over who gets what, where, and how much. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly and easily things get passed.
Yeah. All right. So let's switch to taxes. I think, in a Trump administration, we were talking about tax cuts and incentives to growth. I think it's pretty clear that the taxes will be treated very differently in a Biden/blue wave. But what do you see there?
Yeah, I think so. And again, the big difference is low tax environment versus high tax environment to pay for social programs, to pay for stimulus, things like that, and just a flat out, vengeance against corporations, because there is a belief there that, wealth is bad, that, people should only be able to earn so much, should only be able to keep so much, and, should pay so much. So you're going to see a high tax environment. You're going to see modern monetary theory, redistribution of wealth. People will get paid not to produce. And that's just what that is. It's not good, bad, right or wrong. I don't know if that's the right thing or not. We'll see. But that's, we've already experimented that a little bit with the payment, with the PPP program, where people got $600 a week to stay home. Why go back to work, when you're at that level? So we already know what that does. So we'll be heading towards that. But you're going to have to raise taxes to pay for all these programs. And the fundamental philosophy of that type of administration and that type of a Congress is people should not make so much money. They should be giving away most of their wealth to the people that don't have it and redistribute. So, that's just what's going to happen. And when that happens, when you tax, big business and big corporations, and you tax capital gains that haven't been realized yet, and that's a big one in the tax plan, is if you're like all you guys that are trading Robinhood right now that had all these big gains, if we have a blue wave, you better sell this year, because those gains, whether you take them or not, are going to get taxed. And, that's the type of stuff that's on the table. If you buy property and you've got equity in that property, they want to tax the equity. So that's the type of stuff that you'll be facing, are some pretty radical tax policies that, we've never seen before, that are very destructive from a production standpoint. It puts the power and the control in the hands of the government.
Yeah, one of the things that I clearly see happening with tax changes, and again, this is assuming a Biden blue wave, is they're going to take out Trump's tax returns from the last couple of years. They're going to throw them up on a board and say, close every loophole that he took, make those go away. The fact that he
they're going to gut it. And, the philosophy is it's only on rich people, 400,000 and above. That's the only people that are going to, have any kind of consequences, pay any kind of taxes. But the problem is when you start taxing business, that's a small business owner, potentially that's somebody who's employing a lot of people. When you start raising taxes to the point that, it no longer makes sense to be in business, you have a lot of people that are just going to fold, and it's going to continue to perpetuate the problem versus going the other way. Let the business owners keep their, as much of the profits as possible to expand and grow. If you give the government the bulk of your profits in the form of tax, and there's no incentives from a tax standpoint to reinvest and grow, then what happens?
Yeah.
The economy contracts.
I think this is the tax system under either administration. I think it's going to be one of the largest deltas. Right? I think a lot of these things are kind of, they're just to use blue because we said blue 10 times in a blue wave, right? Trump's blue is darker, Democrats is lighter, whatever it is. But the tax structure, right? It's going to be night and day. It's going to be red and blue or whatever you want to call it. It's going to be
And here's the big thing to
vastly different.
remember. Here's the big thing to remember. In order to tax people, they have to be employed. They have to be producing. They have to be working. So the government, either way, hasn't figured out how do we put people back to work now, with what's going on, and how are we going to put them back to work in the future? Infrastructure is not going to do it. That's not because there's a lot of people that just can't work in those trades in the field, working on bridges and this and that. There's just not enough jobs to create enough tax revenue. So what's going to happen? They're going to realize, wait a minute, we have a large amount of people unemployed. We're paying them to stay unemployed. So we have to generate tax revenue. So it's going to come from the people that are producing. So I think, it'll be a very punitive tax environment that sounds like a good idea because people need help. And there are some gaps that need to be bridged. And there are reforms that need to be done. The problem is the unintended consequences. So I think it'll be very short-lived.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to the next topic again, going down the same list in the same order. It was infrastructure. I think one of the difference we're going to see in the infrastructure is, again, under Trump, it's kind of, he's just a builder, right? So it's going to be very kind of old school cement, bridges, steel, all of that stuff. I think in a Biden administration with the blue wave, you're going to see, I don't know what, I guess they're calling it green stuff or all of that. I think the infrastructure spending may be of the same size, but it will be on different things, in my opinion.
Well, green energy is a black hole. So it's very expensive, and we do have, so global warming is an issue. We do have environmental issues we need to tackle, wildfires, this, that, and the other. But throwing unlimited funding at ideas is not the way to solve these issues. So I think that's where you'll see a lot of that. Again, it's tax and spend. So you'll see a lot of this, programs that have to get paid for.
It's spend then tax.
Yeah. So, those are very expensive things to try to tackle. And, we saw in the Obama administration, kind of a glimpse at that, where a lot of these solar companies were given, government-backed loans that went bust, $300-400 million, to these different companies that, ended up essentially a few people lining their own pockets and the company goes bust. So, that is something that will be a push, and it is on their website. They say that, hey, this new Green Deal, we're not backing it or whatever, but it's on their website.
Yeah.
And, there is going to be a Green New Deal. So I think they understand the roads and bridges. I think they'll attack that, but they're going to attack this too.
Yeah.
So,
exactly.
It'll be interesting to see where that funding goes. And again, that's going to be the big fight, even in the Democratic Party, who gets what, where, and when.
Yeah. All right, going on the manufacturing, do you see manufacturing being treated any different? And maybe it's a combination of manufacturing and taxes. Maybe one of the things that the Democratic with the blue wave talks about is, hey, if you bring manufacturing home, we'll give you a break. Maybe, I don't know. But they could tie some of these things together, perhaps.
So, the question is unions. Okay, so in a blue wave, you're going to have probably legislation that's going to require unionization. So you're going to see a national unionization wave. So the question is, what does that do to existing retail, manufacturing, every business? If you're now all of a sudden you have a business and you have to be a union, and that gets pushed, however that happens. What does that do to commerce? What does it do to manufacturing? And the only way they're going to stop you from offshoring at that point, because you're just not going to be able to manufacture stuff when you're paying somebody $40 an hour. You just can't do it. It just does not work. Unfortunately, not every job can make $40 an hour. It just doesn't work because consumers won't pay the prices that need to be paid for that. Look at automobiles. The only reason they're $70,000 is because of unions, and it's because, $50 to $100 an hour workers. And I'm not disparaging them. I'm just saying that's a lot of money, for that job that is making it unsustainable at a point for vehicles, and it'll reach a point where you just can't sell anything because it's too expensive. So the question is, how do they stop a company from moving, which is probably what they might do. They might say, you're not leaving the country. You can't leave the country. Well, I don't know. I don't know how that works, what that looks like, but I do know that there's going to be a movement towards unionization of all businesses in that environment.
Okay. All right. The next up is inflation. Again, in the Trump administration, we basically said inflation is a non-event for the next 4 years. Do you see it the same way in a Biden blue wave kind of arena?
Again, inflation at the consumer level is going to be extremely difficult without putting a bunch of money in the hands of consumers. So if they do
Okay.
that, yes, you can get some consumer inflation. If they find a way to get the money to the people, you'll see inflation, especially if it's in a redistribution thing. If people just all of a sudden get checks to boost their income because they're making less than somebody else, and that wealth is redistributed, then yes, you could potentially see some inflation there, because now people that don't have any money or don't make as much money all of a sudden now are being subsidized one way or the other. That can create some inflation.
Okay. And then the last one is housing, specifically, again, single family homes. What do you think? What do you think happens there?
Yeah. So I think that policy regime is pro home ownership
Agreed.
at any cost. So I think they're going to put, just like they did pre 2008 and 9, unqualified buyers into houses and mortgages that they otherwise should not be. People that are one refrigerator, bad refrigerator from default, into houses, no money down, very low interest rate loans, but they still have to pay taxes, insurance, maintenance, and all those things. So yeah, I think there will be a push towards home ownership, in this country, which is a good thing for a lot of people, but there are some people that just, should not be owning houses.
Yeah. One of the things that I think housing, so under a Trump administration, I think housing will be very regional, right? There'll be some regions that win and some regions that lose, right? The whole K-shaped discussion we've had many times. I think in a Biden administration, there's far more all ships rise, because I really see a tax incentive for first-time buyers. It was $8,000 back during the collapse. It'd be 15 grand now. I do see the Fed kind of saying, okay, we are going to incent first-time home buyers, and we, the Fed, are going to buy down mortgages to 1.9 or 1.5 or 0.9%. There will be a push towards home ownership, probably like we've never seen before. And, that is going to feel good for a while, but that's how the balloon becomes unsustainable. And we're one recession away from huge problems. So.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what approach, and I haven't looked at the plan, that they have on the table for home ownership in the Biden plan. I haven't looked at their whole platform. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, it's going to be an experiment in socialism with a blue wave, versus, pretty much continue on the path that we've been on pre-COVID, with the Trump administration.
These are the conversations I like, because again, we are at an inflection point. November 3rd is around the corner. There will be a winner, and we got to make investments for the next 4 years. So, Greg, I appreciate your time. Any kind of closing thoughts if we wrap this up?
Yeah. So, I would say whichever side of the fence you're on, whatever, policies, just be aware of what's going on. Make sure you understand the rules and the implications and the changes that may or may not be coming down the pike, so that you can position yourself in a way that you're protected, your investments are protected. So if you're in the stock market and gains and things like that, pay attention to the administrative changes and the rules coming down the pike. So if it's a blue wave, you want to sell, take your capital gains off the table and be prepared for the future. If it's Trump administration and we continue on, your gains are not going to be attacked. So you just got to understand the changes in the tax laws that could potentially be coming down the pike one way or the other, environmental regulations, business regulation, things like that. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, good, bad. Otherwise, I'm just saying be aware, be prepared.
Yep.
Yeah. And just understand what you're going to need to do to move forward.
Very cool. And the last thing I'll say is I voted. Make sure you get out and vote. But this is, a lot of people are talking about voting this election. Awesome. But realize that every year is important. A lot of elections happen at the local level that really change your local environment. So take your passion and energy for voting this year and make sure it carries forward into next year and the year after. So with that, Greg, I want to thank you for your time, and you have a wonderful week.
Yep, you too.
Thanks.